In this video, I bought and played 7 random Steam keys from the internet. After playing each game, I will rank them with these criteria. Overall enjoyability. Does the game make me want to play it more? And did I enjoy playing the game? Graphics. Does the game look visually appealing? And does the game have any graphical issues? Controls. Is the game easy to control? And do the keybinds make sense? And the Steam reviews. How... Detectives, ghosts, and the fear of something coming out of the toilet. This is the only game where an argument between a poet and a known racist who is, possibly, a pedophile can be stopped with the Twilight novels. If you're really in the mood, you can engage in some police misconduct. Personally, I don't like point-and-click adventure games, but this game blew me away with its mild humor, amazing atmosphere, and lovable characters. The only negative I have about this game is that my smooth brain cannot understand a few of the solutions that the most seasoned point-and-click veterans would consider a piece of cake. I don't know how, but this game's graphics are so good that it looks more realistic than the Green Lantern movie. The NFT trend could even be revived with this game's graphics, it's that good. With the game genre being based off 2 controls, how could you possibly mess it up? This game's controls are so simple that a blind monkey could figure it out. With a 95% overwhelmingly positive review on Steam, people found the game's graphics, art style, and funny dialogue charming. At the start of the game, you find yourself in a car wreck, and after waking up, you immediately go to the nearby mansion for help. Now, if this was me, I would not go anywhere near the mansion, mainly because the rich would want to use me for their experiments, or hunt me for sport in the wilderness, or for YouTube prank videos. Look at, oh, fuck, come on, man. For hating scary games, this was not a game I would play in my free time. Other than that, it was a decent game to play. Some of the creatures were not as scary as expected, and some of the jump scares were predictable and not effective. Everything looked really good. Some of the creatures' textures looked a little off, but great nonetheless. Movement was pretty good, but interacting with some items was hard, because the interact prompt would go away while hovering over interactable items until I found the sweet spot. With a 74% mostly positive rating on Steam, people enjoyed the vintage aesthetic the game gave off and thought the scares were alright. People didn't like that the game was around 3 hours long and it costed $25. Texas got an inch of snow, and all hell lets loose. Recruit your team of hot anime girls to fight alongside you against homeless people and your schizophrenic hallucinations. This game's environment pulled me in, its fantastic character design just impressed me, and the gameplay was enjoyable and smooth. The only problem I have with the game is how confusing some of the mechanics are. The main story failed to keep me interested to the point where I started skipping through dialogue. Vambrace had a fantastic art style that pulled me into the game. This game's environment looks so good that I often look at the background and see a story of what was going on in the world. The game has simple left and right movements, and all of the commands can be clicked on instead of using the keyboard shortcuts. Movement felt smooth and simple. Most of the controls can be done with one hand when you're playing with a keyboard. Now you have an extra hand for other activities. With a 66% mixed rating on Steam, people enjoyed that the game had lots of content, the game's art was beautiful, and the story was long and engaging. People didn't like that the game's difficulty was unfair, and when you made quest decisions, there was no clear consequences for your actions. Luigi's Mansion meets Ren and Stimpy meets Minimum Wage Job. Don't you love coming home from work just to play a character who gets paid minimum wage regardless of the hundreds of promotions they get every week? The only fun from this job is sucking off ghosts. You know what I mean. When I first started playing this game, it was fun, and I thought that it found a hidden gem, but this game found a way for me to dislike it real quickly. The gameplay got repetitive because each run goes almost the exact same way. Your character is hard to control, and you will run into the wrong thing many times. Some of the gameplay elements were confusing on whether or not they damaged the player or not. Even though this game is a roguelike, it has none of the elements that make roguelikes amazing. You can play every run the exact same because of the low variety of perks. Some of the perks give off no knowledge of what they do. These perks are so minuscule that you won't be able to figure out what they do within you playing the game. The only redeemable qualities this game has is its style, hitting and sucking up ghosts, and collecting money. This game looks like a Nickelodeon cartoon was ripped off the TV and straight into this game. I felt like a child watching Sunday morning cartoons. I was not able to tell what some of the gameplay elements were supposed to be though. The controls in this game feel terrible. They feel like I'm trying to catch a brown rat in the Taco Bell bathroom. You will slip and slide on shit, and when you think you have it, turns out all you have is a turd. With a 76% mostly positive rating on Steam, people enjoyed the vibrant graphics, the addictive gameplay, and the great soundtrack. People did not like the lackluster co-op mode and thought the levels felt very tight. Imagine a buddy cop movie, but with a divine twist. You have two character choices, a fierce female scorpion, or a guy who's just itching for an excuse to wield that sword he impulsively bought on Amazon. Because, let's face it, what else are you gonna do with a replica medieval sword? God's Trigger, echoing the neon-drenched, adrenaline-pumping gameplay of Hotline Miami, knew it had to dodge the clone label. Their solution, injecting character progression and unique abilities into the mix. But here's a snag. The game plays a bit like a reluctant dance between two partners. You're constantly swapping between the two main characters to bypass certain obstacles, which could feel like trying to salsa with someone who's more into line dancing. Each character has their own XP pool, so if you're favoring one over the other, prepare for a bit of catch-up gameplay. It's like having a favorite child, but still needing to pretend you love them both equally. The co-op mode does offer a neat workaround. Enlist a friend to level up your less favored hero while you stick with your main character. Despite these quirks, God's Trigger is definitely bookmarked in my play again list. It's like that slightly oddball friend you can't help but hang out with. Flawed, but undeniably fun. The cell shading in this game turns the whole experience into a comic book, where the environment feels like it's about to leap out of the screen. It's as if the game world is on the verge of breaking the fourth wall, not for a witty quip, but to complain about its living conditions. And speaking of the graphics, while they mostly hit the mark, some of the textures are like the forgotten side characters of a grim graphic novel. Underdeveloped, underlooked, and quietly resenting their half-finished state. It's like finding a beautifully detailed superhero comic, only to realize some of the pages are sketches, as if the artist decided to take a hiatus mid-issue. The controls in this game glide with a sinister smoothness, like a duel at high noon, where every move is lethally precise. They sync with the rapid combat like a pair of outlaws in a shadowy heist, efficient yet unnervingly seamless. But then, there's a thorn in your side. No option to rebind these controls. It's as if you're forced to ride a horse that only responds to someone else's commands. Unpredictable and mildly treacherous. And some of these buttons, they're like finding a rattlesnake in your boot. Unpleasantly surprising and uncomfortably out of place. It's as though the game, with a sly grin, is playing its own morbid version of musical chairs, leaving you scrambling when the music stops. Sitting at a 72% mostly positive rating on Steam, this game is like that infamous outlaw with a surprising number of admirers. Players have tipped their hats to the enjoyable gameplay, a co-op experience that feels like joining forces with a notorious bandit duo, and graphics that are pretty enough to distract you from the impending doom. However, not everyone's singing ballads around the campfire. The final boss, a beast more painful than a tooth extraction without whiskey, has left some players crying for mercy. And then there are those darn controls. It's like trying to lasso a tornado, wild, unforgiving, and often leading to a spectacular tumble through the dirt. Desert Child is what happens when 1v1 pod racing decides to walk on the wild side. It's not just about the thrill of the race, it's about diving headfirst into a den of morally ambiguous activities. You can roam the city, engaging in pursuits that range from the slightly naughty to the outrageously nefarious. Fancy a bit of theft? Or maybe rigging a race? How about the cathartic joy of wrecking someone else's bike? Hacking into a bank for a digital heist? Hunting bounties? Or borrowing guns from strangers who probably needed them for, well, let's not go there. One curious twist is the game's insistence that you play as a black character. It's an odd choice, like being handed a script in a play where everyone's role is decided except yours. But hey, when you're not indulging in your newfound criminal hobbies, you could chill to some tunes, munch on food, and repair your bike, because what's a bit of Grand Theft Auto without some DIY mechanics? Holy crap, Desert Child was a great game. My first time was on mouse and keyboard, and it was a disaster. It was like trying to perform surgery with a sledgehammer. Clumsy, frustrating, and with a high chance of catastrophe. But then I switched to a controller, and suddenly, everything clicked into perfection. It was as if I'd been fumbling in the dark and someone had finally turned on the lights. The game's atmosphere is nothing short of intoxicating, and the humor, it's like a perfectly timed punchline at a funeral. Dark, unexpected, yet bizarrely fitting. The only snag? Navigating the second city. It's a labyrinth nightmare, a twisted maze of confusion where you'll feel like a rat in an experiment gone wrong. but don't worry, like waking up from a bad dream, you'll eventually find your way. Once you do, it's smooth sailing, or should I say, racing. The pixel graphics in Desert Child are like a beautifully crafted dystopian dream. The style is so captivating, it's as if the pixels themselves are weaving a hypnotic tapestry of a world gone awry. Walking around the city in the game, I felt an uncanny sense of belonging, as if I'd stepped through a screen into a realm where reality blurs with digital fantasy. It's like wandering through a vivid nightmare that you don't want to wake up from. Mesmerizing, haunting, and bizarrely comforting in its own way. Riding the bike in Desert Child is a bit like trying to tame a wild beast with a mind of its own. Every time I confidently hit the speed boost, expecting a surge of speed, I end up on a one-way express trip straight into a wall. It's like the bike has a sadistic sense of humor, misinterpreting my boost forward as, please kindly introduce me to that wall. The whole experience feels like a dance with danger. We are always one misstep away from a dramatic, albeit pixelated crash. On the flip side, moving the bike side to side is a breeze. It's like steering a well-behaved horse after dealing with a bucking bronco. And the controls? Surprisingly intuitive. They're like the calm, understanding friend, patiently waiting for you after you've had your little wall rendezvous. Simple and forgiving. They're a small mercy in a world where your bike seems to have a vendetta against you. With a 76% mostly positive rating on Steam, Desert Child seems to have charmed most of its players. Gamers have appraised the game's style and its simple gameplay that doesn't demand the mental gymnastics of a rocket scientist. Story 2 is straightforward, a refreshing change in a world where video game narratives can be more complex than a conspiracy theory. However, not all feedback was a love letter. The controls seem to have tested the patience of many, like a puzzle that's more infuriating than fun. And then there's the repetitive gameplay loop that has left some players feeling like they're stuck in a loop of monotony. It seems that Desert Child dances the fine line between charmingly simple and deceptively frustrating. Step into this absurd battlefield where Porky Pig and Bugs Bunny seem to have taken a dark turn into military masterminds. It's vehicular warfare with a twist, where you can pledge allegiance to the swine army, indulging in various, let's say, questionable military tactics against the rabbit government. Or, if you're feeling a bit more noble, join the rabbit ranks to stand against the oppressive bacon regime. As you grapple with the moral ambiguity of your choice, war criminal or freedom fighter, let the game's title tunes serenade you. It's a war zone out there, but at least you'll have a catchy tune while you navigate the fine line between heroism and villainy. Swine was an unexpectedly delightful romp through a battlefield that's more charming than chilling. The graphics are like a storybook rendition of war, whimsical yet with a hint of underlying darkness. It's like watching a cartoon, except everyone's armed to the teeth and is out for more than just laughs. The gameplay, while engaging, tiptoes along the edge of frustration. However, the game's foundation was as solid as a bunker. The strategic element of managing finances for troop reinforcements and the tension of hoping your units survive to fight another day added layers to the gameplay that was as intriguing as they were nerve-wracking. It's not just about winning battles, it's about the satisfaction of seeing your carefully hoarded army march onto the next skirmish, battle-scarred but unbeaten. The graphics in Swine are like a charming old photograph. They capture the essence of an era with a certain endearing quality. They're reminiscent of early computer graphics, where the realism was just beginning to dawn on the digital landscape. For their time, these visuals were like the first steps on the moon, groundbreaking and awe-inspiring. The 2019 HD remaster of Swine brings with it both anticipation and a hint of disappointment. It's like uncovering a classic piece of art and realizing that its restoration didn't quite capture the original spirit. The attempt to modernize the graphics feels like it's not even there. The remaster, intended to rejuvenate the game's visuals, but ends up only partially fulfilling its promise. It's as though the game, once a standout in its field, received a modest update rather than a comprehensive overhaul. The graphics, though improved, still carry the weight of their years, reminding us of the fuller potential that a more ambitious remaster could have achieved. The controls in Swine are frankly a recipe for aggravation. For starters, you're stuck using the arrow keys to navigate the camera around the map. This feels as archaic and clunky as using a rotary phone in the age of smartphones, especially when all the hotkeys are huddled around the WASD keys, like they're attending a party you weren't invited to. Then, there's the mouse control. It's stiff, unyielding, like trying to draw a straight line with a stick in the mud. It lacks the fluidity and responsiveness you'd expect, adding an unnecessary layer of challenge to the gameplay. And the cherry on top, the button mapping is set in stone. It's like being handed a map in a foreign language and told to navigate without any translation tools. The inability to customize controls in a game that desperately needs it feels less like a design choice and more like a glaring oversight. Sitting proudly at 94% very positive rating on Steam, Swine has clearly managed to charm the digital socks off a large majority of its players. Among the glowing commendations, the gameplay earns high marks for its satisfaction level. It's like finding a refreshing oasis amid a scorching desert. Even the controls, which personally tested my patience, seem to have worked like a charm for most, proving that one man's frustration can be another man's finesse. And let's not forget the music. It's like a perfect symphony, serenading players through their strategic battles and humorous escapades. However, it's not an entirely rosy picture. Some players have encountered aspects that dull the sheen of this otherwise brilliant game. The gameplay, while initially captivating, tends to feel as repetitive as a broken record for some. This issue is like hearing the same punchline to a joke over and over. It loses its luster after a while. Furthermore, the AI has been criticized for its lack of sharpness, described by some as being as challenging as a bag of wet mice. These criticisms, although not overwhelming, highlight that even the most celebrated games have their Achilles heel.